Sometimes the greatest heroes hide in the most ordinary places. We don't notice them. They pass by us, greet us, do their jobs, until our lives are in danger. That's when we realize that ordinary people are not ordinary at all. This is the story of such a person. A security guard at the same shopping mall for 6 years. Nobody knew who he really was. Until that day, when the armed men entered the mall. David was in the security camera room. He could see everything on the monitors. This is a robbery. People were screaming. Everyone was fleeing in panic. David picked up his radio, took a deep breath, and stepped out of the camera room. At that moment, no one could have predicted what he was about to do. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If stories of hidden heroism and unexpected courage resonate with you, subscribe for more tales of extraordinary people who reveal their true nature when crisis strikes. The afternoon sun streamed through the skylights of Westfield Shopping Center as David Thompson began his routine patrol. At 58, he had been working the same security position for 6 years, walking the familiar corridors with the quiet efficiency that had made him nearly invisible to the thousands of shoppers who passed him daily. David's uniform was standard issue: navy blue shirt, black pants, utility belt with radio and flashlight. Nothing about his appearance suggested anything more than what he appeared to be, a middle-aged security guard nearing retirement, content with a job that required more patience than physical ability. The mall was moderately busy for a Tuesday afternoon. Families with children explored the toy stores, teenagers gathered near the food court, and elderly couples window shopped at a leisurely pace. David's presence was a reassuring constant, the friendly face who gave directions, helped with lost children, and occasionally dealt with shoplifters who rarely posed any serious threat. His radio crackled with routine chatter from the dispatch center. Security 1, we have a report of a suspicious person near the north entrance. Copy that. Dispatch. En route, David replied in his calm, measured voice, the same professional tone he had used for thousands of similar calls over the past 6 years. As he walked toward the north entrance, David's trained eyes automatically cataloged details that other security guards might miss. The unusual number of vehicles with tinted windows in the parking lot. The way certain individuals moved through the crowd with purpose that didn't match casual shopping behavior. The subtle tension in the air that suggested something was off. Old habits, David reminded himself. 20 years of Navy SEAL training didn't simply disappear. Even after 6 years of deliberately routine civilian work, the suspicious person turned out to be a confused elderly man looking for the pharmacy, which David resolved with his usual patience and courtesy. But as he escorted the man to his destination, David's peripheral awareness detected movement that triggered alarms in his subconscious. 3 men had entered the mall through different entrances, moving with coordinated timing toward the jewelry store in the central court. Their clothing was loose enough to conceal weapons, their positioning was too precise to be coincidental, and their communication, brief glances and subtle gestures, indicated military or criminal training. David's pulse quickened slightly, but his expression remained unchanged. After 20 years of high-stakes operations, he had learned to maintain perfect calm while his mind processed tactical information with practiced efficiency. The 3 men converged on prestige jewelry, just as David reached the security camera room. Through the bank of monitors, he could see the situation developing with crystal clarity. The men were positioning themselves for what was clearly a coordinated robbery, one at the store entrance, one covering the main corridor, and the third already inside threatening the staff. David's transformation was instantaneous but invisible. The quiet, unremarkable security guard remained outwardly unchanged, but internally, Lieutenant Commander David Thompson, former Navy SEAL Team 6 operative, began processing the tactical situation with deadly precision. Through the security cameras, David could see shoppers beginning to realize what was happening. A woman near the jewelry store screamed as she saw the gun. Children started crying as their parents grabbed them and fled. The coordinated robbery was turning into a potential massacre As panic spread through the enclosed space, David's radio erupted with frantic calls from other security personnel. Code Red, armed robbery in progress. All units respond. But David knew that the mall's other security guards, well-meaning but minimally trained civilians, would be completely unprepared for armed professional criminals. Their standard protocol involved calling police and evacuating the area, which would take precious minutes during which innocent people could be killed. David made a decision that would shatter 6 years of carefully maintained anonymity. Instead of following standard security protocols, David began implementing a tactical response that belonged to his previous life. He accessed the mall's emergency communication system, switching from the standard security frequency to the emergency broadcast channel that would reach every store simultaneously. Attention all Westfield personnel and shoppers, David's voice carried new authority that cut through the rising panic. This is Security Command. We have an active armed robbery situation in the central court. Do not approach the jewelry store area. Move calmly toward the nearest exit and evacuate the building immediately. His voice was steady, controlled, and carried the kind of calm authority that made people instinctively trust and obey. It was a voice trained to command in life or death situations, though no one at the mall had ever heard it before. Through the monitors, David watched the 3 robbers' reaction to his announcement. They hadn't expected coordinated resistance, and their body language showed confusion about the professional tone of the response. This wasn't supposed to be complicated. Get in, grab the jewelry, get out before security could react. David continued his tactical assessment. The robbers were armed with handguns, probably semi-automatic pistols based on their grip positions. They were experienced enough to coordinate their timing, but sloppy enough to be caught off guard by unexpected resistance. Most importantly, they had positioned themselves in a way that created clear sightlines for someone with the right training and equipment. The mall's security office contained equipment that most people would consider routine: first aid supplies, communication gear, emergency protocols. But David had quietly modified his equipment over the years, adding items that served dual purposes. His emergency medical kit contained smoke grenades. His maintenance tools included tactical restraints. His emergency radio equipment featured military-grade jamming capabilities. David began implementing a plan that would have impressed his former SEAL teammates. First, he activated the mall's fire suppression system in the central court area, creating confusion and limited visibility that would disrupt the robbers' coordination. The sudden discharge of water and emergency lighting would also clear innocent bystanders from the danger zone. Next, he used his modified radio equipment to jam the robbers' communication frequencies, preventing them from coordinating their escape or calling for backup. Finally, David emerged from the security office carrying what appeared to be standard emergency response equipment, but moving with the fluid precision of someone trained for combat operations. The central court had transformed into chaos. Water from the sprinkler system cascaded down, emergency lights flashed, and most of the shoppers had evacuated toward the exits. The 3 robbers stood in the middle of the confusion, trying to maintain control of a situation that had suddenly become much more complicated than they had planned. David approached from an angle that kept him in their blind spot, using store displays and architectural features for cover. His movements were ghost-like, visible to security cameras, but invisible to the confused robbers who were dealing with malfunctioning communications and unexpected environmental challenges. The first robber never saw him coming. David's approach was silent and precise, and his takedown was swift and non-lethal. The man simply collapsed unconscious, his weapon secured before he hit the ground. The second robber noticed his partner's disappearance and spun around, weapon raised, but found only empty corridor and the continuing chaos of the fire suppression system. David had already moved to a new position, using tactical movement patterns that would have been impossible for anyone without extensive military training. The third robber, realizing something was seriously wrong, began backing toward the jewelry store, probably intending to take hostages. This was exactly what David had anticipated and prepared for. From his concealed position, David deployed a smoke grenade that filled the remaining area with dense, obscuring vapor. In the confusion, He moved with supernatural quiet, disorienting the remaining robbers and systematically neutralizing them one by one. When the smoke cleared, all 3 robbers were unconscious and zip-tied with professional restraints, their weapons secured and tagged as evidence. The jewelry store staff was unharmed, and no shots had been fired during the entire operation. Mall manager Rebecca Chen arrived on scene with local police, expecting to find a chaotic crime scene requiring extensive investigation and medical response. Instead, she found 3 unconscious suspects neatly restrained and ready for arrest, with David Thompson calmly filing an incident report as if he had just dealt with a routine shoplifting case. "David," Rebecca said, staring at the scene with complete bewilderment, "what exactly happened here?" "Armed robbery attempt," David replied in his usual understated manner. 3 suspects, neutralized without injury to civilians or significant property damage. Police Detective Maria Santos, who had worked robbery cases for 15 years, studied the scene with growing amazement. The precision of the takedowns, the professional restraint techniques, and the tactical coordination required to neutralize 3 armed criminals without violence was beyond anything she had seen from civilian security personnel. "Mr. Thompson," Detective Santos said, "I need to understand how a shopping mall security guard managed to single-handedly neutralize 3 armed robbers without anyone getting hurt." David was quiet for a moment, knowing that his 6 years of anonymity were about to end. "I have some prior experience with these types of situations." "What kind of experience?" "Military," David replied simply. "What branch?" David met her gaze directly. "Navy SEALs. 20 years active duty including 12 years with SEAL Team 6. The detective's eyebrows rose dramatically. SEAL Team 6 was the most elite special operations unit in the U.S. military, responsible for counter-terrorism operations that rarely made public news. "Why didn't this appear on your employment background check?" Rebecca asked. "Because my service record is mostly classified," David explained. "The mall's background check would have shown my military service but none of the operational details." Detective Santos studied the restrained suspects and the tactical precision of their capture. "Mr. Thompson, what you accomplished here, this level of operational planning and execution, this wasn't standard security work." "No," David agreed, "it wasn't." Over the next several hours, as statements were taken and evidence processed, the full scope of David's background gradually emerged. Detective Santos made calls to federal contacts, and while the specific details remained classified, she received confirmation that David Thompson had been one of the most decorated special operations soldiers in recent military history. The 3 robbers, when they regained consciousness, provided statements that revealed the sophisticated nature of their planned operation. They had been professionals with military training of their own, expecting to overwhelm civilian security and escape before law enforcement could respond. David's intervention had completely disrupted their plan and saved what could have been multiple civilian casualties. News of the heroic security guard spread quickly through the local community, and then to regional media outlets. David found himself reluctantly thrust into a spotlight he had specifically avoided for 6 years. Rebecca Chen called him into her office the day after the incident. "David, I don't know how to properly thank you for what you did. You saved lives and probably prevented this mall from becoming a crime scene that would have traumatized our community for years." "I was just doing my job," David replied. "No, you weren't. What you did went far beyond any security guard's job description. You used skills and training that most people don't have access to." David nodded. "I suppose my background is no longer much of a secret. Why didn't you ever mention your military service? We could have utilized your expertise, created specialized protocols, trained our other security personnel." David was quiet for a moment, looking out the office window at the mall concourse, where families were once again shopping safely. "Because I came here to get away from that life. I wanted a job where the stakes were lost children and shoplifting, not life and death tactical operations. But yesterday, you went right back to that life to protect innocent people. Yesterday was different. Yesterday people were going to die if I didn't act." Rebecca studied his expression. "David, I've been thinking about this all night. We need to discuss your future here."
The corporate office has been calling all morning. They want to know if you'd be interested in heading up a new regional security program, training other guards, developing protocols for emergency situations. I appreciate the offer, but I'm not looking for a promotion. It wouldn't necessarily be a promotion. It would be an evolution of your current role. You could still work here at Westfield, but also help other locations develop security programs that could save lives if situations like yesterday ever happen again. David considered this carefully. What would that involve? Training security personnel in crisis management, developing emergency response protocols, serving as a consultant when other malls face security challenges, using your expertise to help people without having to return to active military service. Over the following weeks, David settled into his expanded role. He remained the primary security guard for the day shift at Westfield, walking the same corridors and helping the same shoppers who now looked at him with new respect and gratitude. But he also began developing training programs for other security personnel throughout the region. The 3 robbers had been sentenced to federal prison, where they reportedly told other inmates about the security guard who fought like a Navy SEAL. The story had become legend in both law enforcement and criminal circles, though David preferred to keep the details private. Detective Santos became a regular visitor to the mall, often consulting with David about other cases where his tactical expertise could provide insights. Their professional relationship had evolved into mutual respect and occasional collaboration on community safety initiatives. 6 months after the incident, a young security guard named Marcus Williams approached David during his lunch break. Marcus had recently been hired and was eager to learn from the man whose story had already become part of mall folklore. "Mr. Thompson," Marcus said nervously, "I wanted to ask if you could teach me some of what you know about security work." David looked at the young man, probably 22, earnest, eager to do well in his new job. "What specifically would you like to learn?" "Everything. How to see threats before they develop, how to stay calm under pressure, how to protect people when things go wrong." David smiled. "That's a tall order, but we can start with the basics. The most important thing isn't the tactical response, it's the awareness that prevents you from needing tactical responses." "What do you mean?" "Most security incidents can be prevented if you know what to look for and how to intervene early. The robbery last month happened because 3 professionals thought they could overwhelm unprepared civilian security. If we had been better trained in threat assessment, we might have identified and disrupted their plan before they ever drew weapons." Over the following months, David developed a comprehensive training program that drew on his military experience while remaining appropriate for civilian security work. His courses focused on situational awareness, de-escalation techniques, emergency communication, and crisis management, skills that could save lives without requiring combat training. The program was so successful that mall security companies throughout the region began requesting David's training services. He found himself traveling to different locations, teaching security personnel how to think tactically while maintaining the customer service focus that was essential to their civilian roles. 1 year after the robbery, David stood in the same central court where the incident had occurred. The jewelry store had reopened with enhanced security measures, and families once again shopped peacefully in the space that had briefly become a battlefield. A young girl approached him, probably 8 years old, with her mother close behind. "Are you the security guard who caught the bad guys?" she asked with the directness that only children possess. David knelt to her level. "I'm one of the security guards who helps keep the mall safe. My mom says you're a hero." David glanced at the mother who was watching the conversation with a grateful smile. "I'm just someone who happened to be in the right place when people needed help. Will you always protect us?" "There are lots of people working to keep you safe," David replied. "Security guards, police officers, firefighters, even your parents. We all work together to make sure places like this are safe for families like yours." After the family left, David returned to his rounds, walking the familiar corridors with the same quiet efficiency he had maintained for 7 years. But now his presence carried additional weight. He was no longer just a security guard, but a symbol of the hidden strength that ordinary people can reveal when circumstances demand it. The mall had become more than his workplace. It had become a laboratory where he could develop and teach security concepts that were being adopted throughout the industry. His military training had found new purpose in civilian service, protecting families and communities rather than fighting foreign enemies. As the afternoon shift ended, David made his final security check of the facility. The mall was peaceful, families were safe, and his colleagues were well trained and confident. He had successfully integrated his two identities, the elite warrior and the civilian protector, into something that served both his need for purpose and the community's need for security. Sometimes the most important battles aren't fought on foreign battlefields, but in the places where ordinary people live their daily lives. David had learned that protecting a shopping mall full of families could be just as meaningful as any mission he had undertaken in his military. He had successfully integrated his tua belicent tua belef alwever tua belicent tua belefio beliv to sester de reason. The greatest victory wasn't the tactical success of neutralizing armed criminals, it was the knowledge that children could play safely in the spaces he protected, that parents could shop without fear, and that communities could thrive under the quiet watch of those who had dedicated their lives to serving others. As David walked to his car, he reflected on the strange journey that had brought him to this point. 7 years earlier, he had been a highly decorated special operations soldier looking for a quiet civilian job where he could serve without violence. He had found that job, but discovered that true service sometimes requires revealing capabilities you had hoped to keep hidden. The robbery had forced him to choose between maintaining his anonymity and protecting innocent lives. He had made the right choice, and in doing so, had found a way to honor both his military training and his civilian values. The shopping mall was more than just a workplace, it was proof that heroes don't always wear uniforms or carry weapons openly. Sometimes they wear security guard shirts and walk quietly among the people they protect, ready to reveal their true capabilities only when those capabilities are desperately needed. David started his car and drove home, satisfied with the knowledge that tomorrow he would return to the same job, walking the same corridors, protecting the same families. The work was exactly what he had wanted when he first took the position 7 years ago, meaningful service that made a difference in people's lives. The only difference now was that everyone knew what he was capable of, and that made his quiet presence even more reassuring to the community he had chosen to serve.